Hi, and welcome to GCs in the House, a podcast spotlighting general counsels. I'm your host, Lena Guo. In my conversations with GCs, we discuss how they got in the top legal seat, obstacles that they had to overcome along the way, and how they are tackling new challenges. Hi, and thanks for joining me. My conversation today is with Scott Willoughby, SVP, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Sangamo Therapeutics, a publicly traded biotech company based in the Bay Area. After graduating UC Berkeley School of Law, Scott began his legal career as a corporate attorney at Latham & Watkins. He was in-house counsel in various industries and companies like Clorox, Uber, and McKesson before landing in the world of life sciences. Scott shares his thoughts on key skills GCs need to be successful, how passion and fascination can go a long way as an attorney in the biotech world, and how to evaluate opportunities in this volatile industry. All right, let's get to it.
Hi, Scott. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's so nice to have you on my podcast.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Lena. This is such a great opportunity for me, and I feel honored that you asked me to do this. So very excited to be here.
So nice to have you. We've known each other over the years, and I would love for the audience to learn a little bit about you and what's led you to Sangamo. But to start, can you just tell us a little bit about Sangamo Therapeutics, your current company?
Sure thing. So Sangamo Therapeutics is a genomic medicine company. So we are a small cap biotech in pre-commercial in the R&D stage, and we work on developing medicines for patients in need across a variety of therapeutic areas. Some of those include hemophilia A, rare disease called Fabry disease. We've got therapies in development for some autoimmune indications like kidney transplants and multiple sclerosis, IBD. We've announced that we've got a really cool product in development for chronic pain management, which is really important right now, and also some other rare diseases like prion disease. And we've also got some programs targeting kind of bigger picture neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and things like that. So we've got a lot going on across a ton of different genomic medicine technologies, some of which your listeners might be familiar with, like traditional gene therapies. We've also got some cell therapy programs, and kind of our cutting edge technology involves what we call epigenetic engineering, which is kind of medicines that affect how all of our genes kind of express proteins, and either suppressing that or increasing the expression of genes to kind of meet the needs for these diseases. So we were one of the pioneers in the space, actually. I know your listeners have probably heard a lot about kind of CRISPR, which is one of the tools that people use in the space. But we were, prior to CRISPR, we were one of the original OGs, I say, in gene editing. And we used a technology called zinc fingers or zinc finger proteins, which kind of do a lot of the same things as CRISPR in a slightly different way. So we have a lot of partnerships too with big pharma companies like Pfizer and Takeda, and we used to have some partnerships with other big pharma companies that you've probably heard of, like Biogen and Novartis, because as a small company, we're always needing to kind of partner with the big pharma companies and generate capital that way. And that's another way to kind of get our medicines into the clinic, through the clinic a little bit more quickly. So lots going on.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. It sounds like there is there is certainly a lot of science and technology going on at Sangamo. And you didn't start out with a science background, right? So what to rewind, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what led you to a career in the law?
For sure, and you're exactly right that how does someone become a GC of a biotech without a science background? Because I definitely don't. I was a political science and a French major, so people are sometimes surprised that you can do that. And it definitely, puts the onus on me to keep me on my toes to keep up with all of our amazing science and technology, which kind of adds a whole additional layer of being an attorney at a biotech company, and makes it quite challenging, but also quite fun and energizing. But in terms of my background, I grew up in the Midwest because my father was an Air Force officer. He was actually a nuclear missile squadron commander, and all of our nuclear missile sites are scattered across most of the Midwest generally. So I was born in Kansas and I grew up mostly in Nebraska and central Missouri, as my father got redeployed to a variety of bases. I had a little bit of a stint in central California as well at an Air Force base, but Omaha, Nebraska is really where I grew up mostly and where my family still lives. And I went to high school there. My father actually happens to be from kind of the San Diego area, my mother from the New York City, New Jersey area. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of when people ask me where I'm from. I'm kind of like, I'm from everywhere. But when I went to college, because my father was a California resident, even though he lived in the Midwest, he retained his residency in California, ended up at UC Berkeley, which was an awesome school to go to, and really got exposed to the Bay Area at that point. Decided I was sick of moving around my whole life growing up and just wanted to stay in one place. So I've literally been in the Bay Area since I went to college many, many years ago. And ended up going to UC Berkeley School of Law almost right after UC Berkeley undergrad, and have been in San Francisco, living here since 1996. So in terms of the legal path, I was kind of one of those weird kids that always wanted to be a lawyer growing up. Maybe I watched too much LA Law or something when I was little. I'm dating myself. I don't know if people remember that show. Harry Hamlin was kind of like my idol back then. And it just seemed like a great career for people with a lot of interest in kind of verbal and written communication. And my parents would say I was argumentative out of the womb, and just, was one of those kids that always liked to argue and debate. And it just seemed like a great career for that. I have no lawyers in my family, and we didn't really know any lawyers growing up. So I kind of decided that without a lot of knowing what I was getting into. My family really wanted me to be an engineer. And so I actually started out as a math major in college, but quickly realized that even though I loved math and was good at it, it didn't spark the same sort of passion as in my other classes, where I did get to kind of exercise those verbal communication skills a little bit more. So I ended up just figuring out that law was for me. I did take a year off in between undergrad and law school, working at Oracle, big tech company here in Silicon Valley, for a year in their legal department, because I just wanted to really confirm for myself that law was what I wanted to do before I dove into law school. And so I worked in their in-house legal department for a year, and it really confirmed my interest in the law. And frankly, at that moment was when I really decided that I wanted to end up in-house, right? I got to see how all of the lawyers at Oracle interacted as part of the business. And so even though I spent, 6 years at Latham and Watkins in the law firm world, I kind of always knew I would end up in an in-house legal department eventually after that experience at Oracle.
It sounds like you were really smart about it, like tried out what it was like to be in house at Oracle, got a feel for what it's like to be an attorney before you kind of really committed. And that's the smart way to go. Some people like myself, similar to you, kind of see what it's like to be a lawyer on TV, and then realize, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so even though your parents said you came out of the womb very argumentative and could debate, instead of going the litigation route, you started out as a corporate attorney.
I did, and when I look back, I'm kind of surprised at that myself. But working at Oracle really kind of, I think, got me excited about kind of transactional work and more corporate side work, which is, at the end of the day, corporate transactions end up ideally with both parties, really happy about building something together and doing a deal. Whereas, all my litigator friends used to say that, even if you win a lawsuit, you've kind of lost, right? I mean, nobody wants to be in a lawsuit to begin with. And so back then, it was also the dot-com boom. For those of people that have been in the Bay Area, it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was the time when so many companies were going public, and so many companies were, developing these innovative technologies. And I just thought that being a corporate attorney was really kind of a better way to be part of that. I have such respect for people in litigation, and it's such a fascinating space. But just for me, I really wanted to be part of that building out organizations and really helping advance innovative technologies. And so being a corporate / SEC and M&A attorney just seemed a little bit more aligned with that. And, being an M&A attorney too, you do get a little bit of that kind of argumentative part of it on all the negotiations. So I think that still fed that argumentative side of me as well.
Wow, and what a great time, as you mentioned, it must have been to be a corporate attorney, to be like in Silicon Valley and in the epicenter of everything that was happening in the early 2000s. And then what led you to into your first in-house role, which was at Clorox?
Yeah, so I was at Latham for about 6 years. I knew it was probably time to start pursuing in-house roles, and it was a little bit of serendipity that I had kind of a friend, not a lawyer friend, who worked at Clorox in corporate communications, and said, hey, a lot of people in the Bay Area don't know about Clorox, right? And they don't think
Mm-hmm.
of it as big. It's one of the oldest companies in the Bay Area. It's been around for over 100 years, headquartered in Oakland, and they do just such a wide diversity of consumer products. And so when this role came open, I chatted with Clorox and just really became enamored with their business and the consumer products world. And it was an amazing place to be. So I started there as a pretty junior in-house attorney and spent 9 years there doing a variety of things. And people don't really know a lot about consumer products, but it just covers so many different areas of the law. I got to travel the world. They have business, they have offices everywhere. I got to do joint ventures and train people on FCPA and compliance matters in, places like Egypt and the Philippines. And I spent a ton of time in Saudi Arabia doing joint ventures and M&A deals. And it was just such an amazing place to work, such a disciplined, kind of well-respected company that's was a wonderful place to learn the ropes of in-house practice with amazing, general counsel who just taught me really how to be an excellent in-house attorney. So I know staying at a job 9 years right now is kind of unheard of in-house,
That's
but
right.
back then it was perfect for me, and I loved it, and it was such an amazing, disciplined company, and a great experience there.
Certainly sounds like it, and you're right. Clorox has been in the Bay Area for what seems like forever, and yet so few people think of them,
Hmm.
because people automatically think of tech. But it really is a fantastic company with a really great legal team. And so you were there for about almost 10 years, and then you ended up working in many different industries. How did you end up in the life sciences space?
Yeah, I'm one of those weird people that has hopped industries. I don't know if the trend seems more now people pick tech or biotech or what have you, but I
Yeah.
feel like it's been a huge enabler of my career, because I always tell people learning how to adjust your counseling style and your lawyering style to the industry you're in, to the culture and company that you're in, is such a secret sauce to becoming a good in-house attorney, and frankly a great GC as well. And so after Clorox, I left with the opportunity to go work at Uber Technologies, which frankly could not be more 180 degrees different than Clorox, a really innovative early stage company at Uber. I didn't end up staying there that long, but it was just such an amazing, I think, counterpoint to my experience at Clorox, and really got me into that fast paced world of early stage tech, and was a really awesome experience as well. From there, I ended up following a friend to McKesson doing M&A work, sort of in the healthcare space. That was my first exposure there, doing billion-dollar M&A deals for them. They're very acquisitive, and they're another one of those
Mhm.
companies that's been around, or that used to be. They actually moved their headquarters, but they are a long-standing Bay Area company. And at that point, I realized at McKesson, such a great legal department, amazing team, but it was this kind of company that you really had to stick around there, 10, 12 plus years to really get that kind of senior level exposure, just because people don't leave because they love working there. And so I had a friend, a sort of acquaintance rather, who was GC of a small biotech company called Achaogen, who kind of recruited me to leave McKesson and go work for him. He was a former Genentech guy, really well respected, and was the GC of a small biotech company. And I really thought twice about it, because it was leaving my comfort zone of working at very large companies, and it would be my first exposure to that really small small kind of startup world. And I left at it because I knew that it was really hard for in life sciences, if you don't have that life sciences background, it can be hard to get into that space. And so I sort of left that opportunity to go work with him and to get in there and get really more of that senior executive and board exposure that I wasn't going to be able to get at the big companies without, a big investment of time in my career. And I think one of the lessons there too is just that this was an acquaintance that I sat on a couple of legal panels with and kept in touch with. And I feel so grateful that I got this opportunity to go work for him as one of his deputies there, because it did give me exposure to this whole other world of biotechnology that I probably wouldn't have had without that personal contact with them. And so I spent a couple of years there at Achaogen. They developed innovative antibiotics. It was such a great experience. I got amazing exposure to the board and the senior executives and just how to develop and launch and get approved a medicine. Unfortunately, it did result in the company running out of money, even though we had an approved medicine. And even though it was kind of a tragic situation, I did get to kind of shepherd the company through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, which I don't recommend, but which from a legal perspective, which is really great. And then it's just opened so many doors for me in terms of other experiences in the biotech world. And from there, I ended up at Sangamo following my general counsel. And when he left, they promoted me. So I feel very grateful to be in this world now. And I'm definitely drawing on all my great experiences from all the other big companies that I've had in a variety of industries and kind of bringing all that to bear in what I do at Sangamo.
Wow, and like you said, I do think it's hard. It does seem harder to jump from one industry to another nowadays. To People seem to typically stick within the same industry, and it does become more difficult to get hired into a different industry when you don't have the experience. So it's really great to see that you really were able to, like you said, be agile and to learn from the different types of companies and industries that you were in. And so, given what had happened at Achaogen and the market being what it is, what are some of the significant kind of legal and regulatory challenges that faces a biotech company like Sangamo?
Yeah, biotech is such a unique industry. I mean, you can literally be a public company in biotech and you literally have no product, right? For years and years and years, you
Yeah.
have no product revenue. And I can't think of any other industry like that. I mean, you might be a software company and not be profitable, but you at least have a product, right? Where
Hmm.
you have customers. Like we don't even have a product. So we are literally a pure play R&D company developing medicines, and it's a highly speculative industry and business, biotech, frankly. You can have all of the best and hottest scientists and smartest scientists in the world, and you can have the best ideas and the best laboratory research results, but then when you get in the clinic and start putting it into actual patients, it can thrive or it cannot. And so it's just a fascinating world to be in because science does what science does, right? And so you spend, tens of millions of dollars developing medicines on a highly speculative basis that can end up in a medicine that gets purchased by big pharma or that leads to, bankruptcy and dissolution of the company. So it's a very Wild West sort of industry, and it's always looking for partnerships and external capital to fuel the pipeline and development of these therapies. And so, as a lawyer, it makes it very fascinating, very challenging. You have a lot of regulatory requirements. Obviously, you've got all of the FDA regulations, all of the we call them good clinical practices, good lab practices, good manufacturing practices, all sorts of compliance requirements, but you don't have a huge legal department or a lot of cash, frankly, to manage through them. And so it makes it very interesting as a legal department to try to manage all of those compliance challenges, given that limited footprint you have. Beyond that, IP and patents in particular are such a key component of biotech that you always have a very robust patent portfolio to manage through and lots of infringement risks to manage through in addition. And on top of that, you've got your public company challenges of making sure you're staying compliant with all of the evolving SEC and NASDAQ regulations, and all of this in an atmosphere where your cash runway tends to be very limited, and you're always needing to develop more cash to fuel your pipeline, because again, you don't have product revenues to rely on here. You're purely relying on investment capital of to fuel all this. So very fun, very challenging. It's a very unique environment. I mean, I can't think of any other industries that have this particular set of challenges, but for me, it's been very fun and a great way to stretch my legal skills and stretch my career.
Sounds like it, especially at a pre-commercial company. It sounds like it's certainly a roller coaster ride, and not one for the faint of heart. You
No.
And you joined Sangamo in the early days of the pandemic. So, looking back, what are some of the notable changes that the company and legal department have had to weather over the years?
Yeah, such interesting times, right, over the past 3 or 4 years in the whole world, and definitely in biotech as well. I mean, biotech went from being, the hottest industry on the planet during COVID, right? I mean, look at how Pfizer, Moderna, and all the vaccine manufacturers kind of saved humanity in some way, right? And so that
Right.
led to a lot of additional investment in biotech. And I still think that, while biotech, again, the winds have kind of reversed, and so there's less interest in investing in biotech right now because it is such a speculative industry, and investors are a little bit more picky right now. But I still think that over time, you're just going to see more and more investment in this space as there's more scientific developments to really extend the human lifespan and really tackle some of the biggest healthcare challenges facing humanity, whether that's cancer or Alzheimer's or heart disease. And so, I think COVID was really an inflection point where it brought a lot more attention to the space. On a personal level, it was very interesting because when I interviewed at Sangamo, it was in, I think, February of 2020. And that was just when we all learned what Zoom was, right? And the whole world started changing, right? And we
Yeah.
really started to do everything over video conference. All of my interviews were on Zoom. I never met, then when I got hired, I literally never met the team in person that I worked with for like 18 months, which is just crazy to look back at that time. And then when I got promoted to GC, I had to hire a bunch of people on my team, and many of them ended up being remote hires. And again, a sea change in kind of how I think legal departments were developed and managed, because before that, everybody had to be on site 5 days a week. And over COVID, we realized that that was sort of unnecessary. And so now my team's on site about 2 or 3 days a week. And then I've got a handful of attorneys who are also remote attorneys. And so huge sea change. And I think how we think about our ways of working, I think the tides are starting to change a little bit to go back to more in-office time and maybe fewer fully remote employees. But I still think those trends are going to, endure. So definitely an interesting time to be practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to hear that you and your team were able to at least shift to a hybrid model during COVID, because I know that some companies in the biotech space were still very much a 5 days a week in office, even during COVID. And you had mentioned your old GC left, and then you were promoted to GC, and that doesn't always happen for deputies or the VP of corporate. When the old GC kind of moves on, sometimes they bring in someone else. So can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the GC role at Sangamo?
Sure. And again, I feel very grateful. I mean, and to be honest, I had to interview for it, right? There was definitely a ability for the CEO to go externally.
Hmm.
He frankly didn't know me that well. I'd been there about a year and a half, but it didn't feel in any way that long, because a big chunk of that was during COVID and Zoom. So I probably didn't have as much, FaceTime with the CEO as I would have liked before going through the interview process, just because of COVID. But to his credit, he really had a belief in kind of nurturing talent, and he knew this would be my first general counsel role. He also had, I think, great faith in my former GC, who I followed from multiple companies, and who developed me really well and kind of teed me up for this role. And so I feel like I convinced the CEO that I could bring all that to bear with him, and that I would make him happy and make the board happy. I interviewed with a lot of board members as well, and I think they all saw something in me that I had potential, and gave me the opportunity. So I feel very, very grateful for that. And it's definitely something I try to pay forward, right? And realizing that giving people first-time opportunities is such a great and important way to sort of develop the legal talent as a whole. And it's so easy to just say you want to hire people that have done a role before, exactly what you're looking for, but there's also a huge merit in giving people those opportunities and letting them develop and grow into it. And in some ways, you generate, I think, more goodwill and loyalty through that in some cases than just hiring somebody off the shelf who could do the role right away.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very wise observation. And you mentioned your former GC who sounded like was a mentor over the years. What were some of the other kind of critical factors that helped you land this role, especially as you were interviewing with the CEO and with the board? And was there any feedback about what you did particularly well, or kind of your skill set or knowledge that helped set you apart from other candidates?
I think that's a great question. I do think that people looked at my resume and were like, wow, this guy's been an attorney in a variety of different companies across a variety of different industries. And where I think some more, provincial viewpoints would have said, oh, he hasn't been in biotech that long. I think people that read through my background could see that there was some learning skills there that could be adjusted and tailored to a variety of different industries, to a variety of different company cultures, a variety of different leadership teams. And I always say being a successful in-house attorney, really, it's that reading the room and really applying your lawyering to the people that you're counseling, and learning what's important for the company, diving into new areas of law that you may not be super expert with, but kind of learning how to advise people about the various risks applicable to those areas of law, and adjusting it to the risk appetite of your leadership team and of the industry. And so I think people started to see that as more of a plus rather than a negative of me kind of being in these variety of different industries, because they could see that being in a variety of different companies, you do just bring to bear, I think, a lot of different adjustment of your learning style. And frankly, I think I was able to just develop good relationships with people. I mean, ultimately, being a GC, you're on a leadership team, right? You're the head of legal, but you're on a team, and being able to fit into the team and bring a different set of perspectives and ideas. And frankly, not being in life sciences that long, in some ways, I'd like to think that I can help translate their highly technical jargon sometimes to our investors, in some cases who may have less scientific aptitude, but just communicating these innovative technologies and platforms that we have in ways that resonate a little bit more with the general public and with our variety of stakeholders. Because sometimes when you're so in the weeds in something, that becomes more challenging, whereas my lack of scientific background sometimes, I think, can be almost a virtue sometimes on those communication needs. So
What advice do you have for attorneys with an eye towards becoming a GC at a biotech company?
yeah, I mean, again, biotech is only going to grow as an industry, but I do think that in general, the biotech community likes people that have a passion for the science, right? A passion for healthcare and for helping patients in need. And some fluency, I think, with scientific concepts is always helpful, whether you get that through exposure to, the healthcare industry more broadly or biotech more specifically, is always helpful. But in terms of being a GC, I just always tell people that curiosity is a huge one. I mean, you're going to be dealing with so many different areas of laws and regulations, many of which you may have not had exposure to before. And if you get energized and jazzed by diving in and kind of figuring out how those work, and not to say that you need to be the expert, but learning how to frame issues in which you're not an expert for a more general audience, I think is a really big component of being a successful GC anywhere, but especially in a biotech company with the wide variety of legal and compliance risks. And I think you have to love counseling a variety of different types of personalities, right? I mean, on my leadership team alone, if I look across, research and development and the CEO and our manufacturing, they're all kind of different personalities and bringing different backgrounds and levels of sophistication to a variety of legal topics, and learning how to um, coach and counsel them differently based on their needs and then their personalities, I think is a really key skill for being a good GC. Developing talent, as I mentioned earlier, I have such an amazing team that, do such an amazing job for the company, and learning how to find opportunities to develop them and let them grow and shine and kind of nourish their own career and professional and personal um, interests, I think is really key. And, there's always this little piece of me that's like, I wake up, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing some days, and I'm dealing with stuff that I've never done before. And just learning to deal with that fear and have it be exciting to you rather than something that paralyzes you, right? And generating that confidence that you can figure stuff out, that you know how to lean on external and internal advisors to help you figure something out that you may not be comfortable with, and just building that confidence, staying humble, learning how to illustrate those risk curves, all things that I talk about when I think about being a great GC.
Wow, that's a very comprehensive list. Thank you, Scott. And there are certainly so many things, so many factors to tackle and learn and to excel at. For example, when you mentioned counseling different types of people in leadership or R&D, like how were you able to hone that skill? Was it just time and experience? Was it books and coaching? Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, there's no substitute for experience, and no substitute for, I think, just building relationships with people. And that does take time. I think being a good listener, being humble, and I think in biotech in particular, like I work with some of the most brilliant scientists and clinicians and engineers in the world, right? Working on hugely cutting edge, innovative stuff that honestly, to me as a non-scientist, literally seems magical sometimes. I'm like, wow, like how do
Mhm.
we do that? And I think staying humble and learning to listen, um, and learning that, as lawyers, we obviously have our own expertise and, areas of knowledge that we feel expert at. But I think just being passionate about what we're doing, being curious, building relationships with people, and staying humble, and letting those relationships kind of evolve over time is super key. And people will, you'll find, love to talk about what they do. They love to educate others on what they do. And they love when people are as fascinated about what they do as they are. And so I think it's really important in these scientific areas to show some sense of passion and fascination with what the rest of the team is doing, because it just really gives you credibility as a counselor and enables you to better advise them. And so I can always sense when an attorney is sort of a mid-level attorney, sometimes we're under this perception that we have to be the smartest person in the room. And I think as we get more senior, we realize that that's actually can be a detriment, right? Our skill as a GC is not being the smartest person in the world in the room. It's really realizing that we have so much more to learn, and it's really bringing the wisdom to it rather than the smartness, if that makes sense. And just continuing to be a constant learner and listener, I think for me has been how I've been successful in my role.
That is a very humbling mindset to have. And Given it's the biotech industry is very exciting, but and you had alluded to it, it can be a bit volatile. What factors would you recommend candidates consider when evaluating a GC role at a biotech company this day and age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's such a variety of different biotechs. I don't think there's one right way to evaluate a company. And I will say that, as you alluded to, this is a volatile industry. So if it's important to you that you're going to have a role for 5, 7, 9+ years, honestly, small cap biotech might not be for you because companies come and go. It's just the nature of the industry, right? And as I mentioned, scientific and clinical developments can, elevate a company quickly and it can grow quickly, or it cannot, and it can dissolve or shrink. And so you have to be, I think, prepared for that, and be willing to deal with that on a personal level, because it can be very challenging for people who don't have, I think, the right mindset and ability to deal with that level of volatility. Um, and that said, no matter what you do in terms of your due diligence on a company, like I said, things change. The winds of what's hot in biotech change. Cash ability to raise cash changes over time, and so there's a lot of external factors you just, by the nature of the industry, you won't have control over. Um, but I will say that I always tell people, looking for that cultural fit with the company. I mean, life's too short to be working with people that you don't have some sort of, um, fit with, you don't feel simpatico with. And so really assessing, is this a leadership team that I want to join, or where I can feel that my voice will be heard and I can thrive? Where the GC role is given pride of place, I think, alongside the CFO and head of R&D, right? And I think biotech, for the most part, respects the legal field just because of its crucial importance to things like IP and the regulatory piece of things, but always making sure that the GC is going to be there at the table for the most key strategic business decisions, I think, is really important. Um, the relationship with the CEO, I think, can't be undervalued. I mean, making sure that you and your prospective CEO have a an ability to work together, and that you feel like you can trust this person, and you kind of have different similar viewpoints when it comes to things like compliance and ethics and just ways of working together, I think, is key. Looking at the cash runway of the company, cash right now is really hard to raise. And so the more cash is king. And if your company has cash to get through the next 3 to 5 years instead of the next 1 to 2 years, that is definitely a key piece of the puzzle in terms of thinking about whether it's a company that you might think has legs. Also making sure that you're passionate about, the science and medicines that are being developed. I really am a true believer in that you have to be passionate about the mission and the values of the organization that you join. Otherwise, you just won't thrive in the role, and frankly, you won't be happy. And so joining a company where you feel like you're going to be able to go to your friends and family and rave about, how excited you are to be there. If you can't do that, I would always advise people, like, well, it's probably not the company for you, because you're not going to be successful in the GC role if you can't be a part of that mission statement and the company values and culture. And so finding either the science or the technology or the therapeutic areas that you can rave about and are passionate about, that's how you're going to be successful as well.
Thank you, Scott. That's all really amazing advice. And especially at this senior level of a role, like you said, if you're not passionate about the mission of the company, or just the science and the people, then it's really not, at the end of the day, it's not going to be a fulfilling job at all. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I always ask my guests, what do you do to decompress, especially given just all that you have to tackle in this role and in this industry? What do you do to stay sane?
Oh gosh. I live in San Francisco, which I still think, despite its current challenges, is one of the most fun and exciting places in the world to live. So I feel very grateful about that. My partner and I bought a house in this cute neighborhood called Corona Heights about 18 months ago, and we spent a lot of time kind of fixing it up and remodeling it, and so that takes up a lot of our time. We always get up to Sonoma County a ton. We love kind of wine country and the Healdsburg area, and hanging out at the Russian River up there, and just enjoying all the fruits of the Bay Area. My dog just passed away a while ago, so we're kind of in the market for a new dog, sadly. So we love to go with our dog and hit all the parks and beaches and things like that. We've developed also a new hobby playing pickleball, which is this sport that seems to be taking over the nation, which is kind of
Yes.
an interesting sport, but it's super fun. I don't know, have you played, Lena, pickleball?
I have not. I am a tennis fan, but I have not gotten around to it. But I always look with I always look with admiration when people are playing. I should really give it a chance.
You should. It's such a great workout. It's super easy to learn and pick up, and it's just a great excuse to get outside and sweat a little and hang out with your friends. And it's been super fun. I'm actually shocked how much fun we're having with it. Because I always thought it was something you did in your 70s, and we're not there yet. So, but it's super fun. And we love to cook, have dinner parties, hang out in the city, travel, all the normal stuff. So, we feel really blessed to live here in San Francisco with such a great community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is the Bay Area is definitely one of the I'm also partial, but this is definitely one of the best places to live. So I'm
For
glad
sure.
that you're finding time to be able to enjoy the outdoors and friends and family, especially given how stressful I think the GC role can be, and in an industry that can be quite volatile. So,
Definitely.
well, Scott, this has been a really great conversation, and I've so enjoyed learning more about you and your path to becoming a general counsel. So, thank you so much for your time and for chatting with me.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Thank you for the conversation, Lena. I feel again honored to speak with you and appreciate the fact that you're doing this, because it's been fascinating to listen to all of your podcasts and learn about the journeys of some of my fellow general counsels. So thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much for listening to GC's in the House. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me next time for an in-depth discussion with another general counsel. I welcome your feedback and recommendations for guests. You can reach me at lguo@mlaglobal.com. Please also reach out if you have any questions or comments about today's episode. Until next time.